For any athlete, anyone who's really committed to excellence, the focus is almost always performance.
Yeah.
Right? Pushing limits, breaking records.
Achieving that peak physical state.
Exactly. But if you actually look under the hood, the foundation that supports all of that effort, it isn't just about how hard you train.
No, it's much more fundamental than that.
It's the fueling, the often invisible act of just eating enough to support the work. Because if that input doesn't match the output, the whole thing starts to wobble.
And it often collapses without the athlete even knowing why. That's the critical point. We all focus on the training loads, the technique, but when that basic energy balance is consistently off, we run to something the medical community calls relative energy deficiency in sport, or REDs for short.
And this isn't just a term for feeling tired.
Not at all. It's a very specific defined syndrome. It captures all the complex health consequences that pop up when the body just doesn't have enough energy left over to run its basic systems.
There's like a systemic emergency.
That's a perfect way to put it.
Okay, so let's really unpack this. In our deep dive today, we're going to focus on understanding that exact energy deficit that causes the problem.
And the really startling list of systems it damages.
Yeah, because from what we've seen in the sources, this goes way beyond simple fatigue. If you're an athlete, a coach, or you just care for athletes, you really need to grasp this.
It's non-negotiable for safety and performance.
So, to get into the state of emergency, we have to start with the core concept: energy availability. It sounds a bit technical.
It does.
What does that actually mean for the body, in practical terms?
It's the defining metric, really. And the concept is actually pretty simple. Energy availability, or EA, is the amount of energy, the calories that are left over for your body's essential functions.
Left over after what?
After you subtract the energy you burn during training from the total energy you took in from food.
Okay, so it's not just about eating, say, 2,000 calories a day. It's about eating those 2,000 calories. But if you burned 500 in your workout, you really only have 1,500 left for everything else.
Exactly. I like to think of it as your body's operating budget. Your paycheck is your calorie intake.
Right.
Your training is a mandatory fixed cost. Energy availability is what's left for, keeping the lights on, repairing the house, everything.
And if that budget gets slashed,
that's when the body has to make some very tough decisions. The syndrome of REDs happens when that energy availability number drops too low for too long.
Is there a specific threshold?
There is. Research often cites a general threshold of below 30 kilocalories per kilogram of fat-free mass per day. When an athlete is consistently below that line,
the body goes into rationing mode.
Precisely. It starts prioritizing immediate survival-moving muscles for training, and it just shuts down or suppresses what it considers non-essential maintenance.
And that's where it gets so interesting, because the things the body decides are non-essential are actually the things that dictate your overall health.
Exactly. It's a systemic whole-body impairment.
So what's the first domino to fall?
Well, you see a cascade failure. It often starts at the most fundamental level with metabolic suppression. The body actually slows down its own metabolic rate to conserve energy.
Wait, so it becomes less efficient at using the energy it does have?
That's a great way to put it. It's a survival mechanism that, it completely sabotages performance goals. It can even make weight regulation harder, which creates this vicious cycle.
Wow. And that metabolic issue that then cascades into other problems.
It flows directly into hormonal disruptions. And these are probably the most recognized clinical signs of REDs. We see a severe suppression of the endocrine system.
And what's the most immediate kind of tangible consequence of that?
For female athletes, the most visible sign is menstrual dysfunction. Irregular periods, or even complete amenorrhea, the loss of the cycle altogether.
The body is basically signaling it can't afford the energy for reproduction.
It's shouting it. But the hormonal suppression hits male athletes too, affecting testosterone, estrogen, other key hormones needed for building and repair.
I want to circle back on that. If hormones are suppressed, that must have a huge impact on something like bone health.
A devastating impact. This is one of the most serious long-term consequences. Those hormones, estrogen, testosterone, and another one called IGF-1, are absolutely essential for bone remodeling.
Our bones aren't static, right? They're always being rebuilt.
Constantly. So when those hormones drop because of low energy, the breakdown of old bone continues, but the building of new bone just stops, or it's severely limited.
So the body is actively weakening its own structure.
It is. It's diverting resources away from the skeletal system. This leads to lower bone mineral density and, critically, a much higher risk of stress fractures.
Which sidelines an athlete immediately.
And it can lead to osteoporosis later in life. It's a huge health issue, not just a performance one.
The sources also mentioned immunity and even just basic cellular repair, which I guess makes sense.
It does. If a body is prioritizing running a race, it can't afford to fight off a cold. So you see impaired immunity, more sickness.
More missed training days.
And at the cellular level, you get reduced protein synthesis. That process is the foundation of muscle repair after you train. If you can't repair the muscle.
You're just tearing yourself down. The training is effectively wasted.
Precisely. You're not adapting.
And what about cardiovascular risk? I have to say that one was surprising.
It often is, but it fits the bigger picture. Low energy availability impacts heart function. In severe cases, you can see bradycardia, a really slow heart rate, as the body tries to save even more energy.
Wow.
The heart is a muscle, and prolonged deficits can affect its structure and efficiency. These are all serious, serious impairments.
That is an alarming list. Metabolic, hormonal, skeletal, immune, even cardiac.
It's astonishing what the body sacrifices just to keep moving.
It really is. But this brings up a crucial question. How do athletes get into this state? How do they either accidentally or intentionally create this deficit? We need to go from the what to the why.
That's a vital transition because the causes are on a huge spectrum and they need very different types of intervention. The research breaks them down into three main categories.
Let's start with the one that seems the most benign, I guess, the unintentional one.
Right. Unintentional causes. This is often just a lack of awareness. A distance runner might track their diet, but they just completely underestimate the sheer volume of calories they need.
Like 4, 5, 6,000 a day?
Sometimes more. They just can't physically eat enough food, or they don't realize how big of a deficit they're creating. It's a logistical problem, not a psychological one.
So that athlete might feel like they're eating a ton of food, but relative to their output.
It's a starvation diet. They've fallen into low energy availability by pure accident.
Okay, so what's the next category?
The second is intentional behaviors, and this is where it gets much more complex. These are deliberate actions to restrict food, often driven by external pressures.
Like performance goals, or a focus on body composition.
Both. An athlete might believe that being lighter will make them run faster or jump higher, so they deliberately restrict calories to get there. The really tricky part is that an unintentional deficit can quickly become intentional.
Oh, so.
An athlete might accidentally lose weight, see a small, temporary boost in performance, or get positive feedback, and then start restricting on purpose. The line between those two categories can blur very, very quickly.
And then there's the third category, which is the extreme end of that.
Exactly. Clinical eating disorders. This is the most severe form where the psychology and behavior require clinical intervention. In all three cases, the physiological result is low energy availability.
But the root cause is totally different.
And that determines the treatment path. Understanding the why is crucial.
So given that range, who's most at risk? The sources were pretty clear that the risk profile changes dramatically depending on the sport.
Oh, absolutely. Certain sports create a perfect storm for this. The research points to three high-risk categories.
And what's the first one?
First up are the endurance sports. Marathon running, triathlons, long-distance cycling.
Where the energy expenditure is just massive.
It's relentless. The deficit there is often just driven by the sheer calorie demand that's so hard to meet. It's pure math, basically.
Input can't keep up with output.
Exactly. Then you have the other two categories, which are driven more by external pressure.
Aesthetic sports and weight class sports.
Right. Aesthetic sports, think gymnastics, figure skating, ballet. They have judging criteria that can put a huge pressure on maintaining a very low body weight or a specific lean look.
So that pressure drives the intentional restriction.
It absolutely can. And with weight class sports like wrestling or boxing, you have athletes intentionally and repeatedly manipulating their weight.
Sometimes in really extreme ways to make a way in.
Yes. Very aggressive, restrictive behaviors that force the body into a severe, acute state of low energy availability over and over again. It's incredibly risky.
So, if we step back, what does this all mean for you, for the listener? The key takeaway here seems to be that energy availability is everything.
It's the foundation.
And when it drops too low, for whatever reason, the consequences just cascade through your entire body. Metabolic, hormonal, skeletal, it's a systemic failure.
And it impacts not just your performance today, but your long-term health. That potential for lasting bone density loss is really scary.
It is, which highlights why the research puts so much emphasis on early diagnosis and screening.
Absolutely. This knowledge isn't just academic. It has to lead to proactive intervention. It's an urgent public health issue within sports.
Recognizing the syndrome and acting on it seems to be the most critical step.
It is. And, this raises a really interesting final thought for you to consider.
Oh.
The source material we looked at specifically mentioned that more research on REDs in Icelandic athletes is needed right now.
Why there specifically?
To help them develop their own national guidelines for prevention and treatment. And that makes you think. If a country with a highly organized sports culture is still in the process of developing basic national guidelines,
then awareness and screening must be far from universal.
Exactly. If research is still driving the establishment of baseline guidelines in some places, how established is the awareness of REDs globally? And more importantly, what level of screening and knowledge should you be demanding for yourself or for your team right now?
It suggests there's still a massive gap between what we know about REDs and what's actually being done about it on the ground.
A crucial gap.